Well, here we are. Back at it again with the next episode of This Crazy Train. Before I get into this installment, I just want to explain why I'm not active again. I got a new job, but despite it being part time, it is somewhat physically draining, so please keep that in mind. Also, trigger warning for those who want to step away. This episode will delve into a lot darker topics than the last one, like abuse and self deletion. So, if you're uncomfortable hearing about either of those topics, feel free to click off the video and stop watching. I completely understand. This ex is a mere step down in toxicity from my worst ex ever, so unfortunately, this episode will be a roller coaster. Once more, the purpose of this series is to just recollect on these events, and they will all lead up to the finale where I will be talking about in detail the worst partner I ever had, and also why I refuse to date a female after her. For those who don't understand the format and didn't watch the first episode, I will be talking about, in order, the timeline of the relationship, specific important events in order of when they happened to the best of my remembrance, what caused our breakup, if we stayed friends or split up completely, what I'd do if I ran into them today, and what I learned from said relationship. Now, onto the story. I will be calling this guy Rubik because he was obsessed with Rubik's Cubes back then, and that's honestly the best name I can come up with for him. I met Rubik because he was actually dating my best friend at the time, who we will call Sketch. Sketch and Rubik had dated for about 2 or 3 months before Rubik broke up with her because apparently she was quote unquote too clingy. More on that later. I had met him because he was walking Sketch to class one day and we introduced ourselves. Ever since that, he thought we were like best buddies, which was really confusing to me as we had only ever met once. Then he tried to catch me after class and stuff, and I remember thinking, like, why aren't you trying to go see Sketch instead? They ended up breaking up, and I hadn't talked to Rubik in a couple months. Eventually, I ran into him again as a guy who we'll call Stitch was friends with Rubik, and another guy who we'll call George Thorogood. I had brought a Rubik's Cube on the bus with me and was showing it to Stitch when Rubik interrupted us and pulled his out. I was like, oh, nice. And then he kind of just kept interrupting Stitch and I's conversation. The next day, I gave Stitch my phone number as we had met on that bus ride home the prior day, and I didn't get a chance to give it to him then. And Rubik insisted I give him my number as well, so I did, not really thinking anything of it. The same day I started dating Rubik was actually the day I broke things off with my rotten ex for good. I admittedly used him at first as sort of a scapegoat to get away from her. I had caught her cheating on me again. More on that in the finale. So I had enough and screamed at her that we were done, and then I just went to Spanish class. After school, I got off the bus and I saw Stitch running towards me, so I invited Stitch into my house and introduced him to my mom. I had gotten a text from Rubik once Stitch and I started playing Xbox, and he wanted to come over as well. I said okay, and eventually he did. Stitch, Rubik, and I just kind of did stupid stuff like throwing plushies at each other and raiding the fridge for ice cream, and then Stitch had to go at sundown, but Rubik stayed a little bit longer. We watched Amazing World of Gumball, we ate some pizza. He kept trying to hold my hand, so I kind of kept shoving him off because I didn't want anything to do with that at the moment. And then he had to leave around like 9:30, 10 o'clock. That same night, I get a text from Rubik a couple hours later that says he has something to tell me. I kind of expected what he was going to say, but I texted anyway. I said, what is it? And he had confessed that he likes me. I immediately text Sketch, like, dude, your ex is trying to ask me out, and she said that it was okay if I dated him, and so I told him I'd give it a try. All the while, I was getting texts from my psycho ex-girlfriend about how could I do this to her, and I'm just gonna leave her for some dude I barely know. Again, reiterating that originally Rubik was a scapegoat. Then she tries to pull the same thing that she tried with Arthur, where she wanted me to go poly and date both her and Rubik. I wasn't having that at all, so I ended up muting her after that. Over the next couple weeks, Rubik and I started building up our relationship. My psycho ex wouldn't leave me alone, and eventually Rubik got involved and told her to back the fuck off, or else. It got her to back off, or so I thought. I won't get into too much detail about that till the finale, but she told a friend of mine that I had actually been cheating on her with Rubik that whole time, which was not true in the slightest. My friend then went on to catch her in the lie and blocked her afterwards. After that, contact with my psycho ex completely phased out for a couple months. Again, more about her in the finale. Over a couple months of dating, Rubik's bad side had come out. He had threatened self deletion over the stupidest stuff, would scare me by going offline for hours after saying that stuff and then coming back like, yeah, I'm fine, and had gotten verbally and physically threatening towards me. I had stayed with him though because I just figured he was misunderstood and didn't mean it. He didn't want to be abusive, he was just troubled. Well, it all came to a head when he had handed me his phone for something and I saw a text pop up from some girl he knew. Call me intrusive all you want, but I clicked the message and I saw a bunch of I love yous and the little kissy face emoji and heart emojis between the two. So I lost it, and the whole day I was a complete wreck. A few friends helped me through the day, so I wasn't completely alone, but all throughout the day, Rubik tried to make it seem like I was the bad guy when he'd literally been cheating on me. So I texted him that I wanted to think about this for a couple days and decide where to take the relationship. He kept saying she was just a friend and even got his dad on it, and he lied for him and said that she was just a friend. Hilarious. I finally decided that if he could cut this girl off and promise me he wouldn't pull a stunt like that again, we could stay together. He agreed, and that was the end of it, or so I thought. The coming weekend, he comes over, and so does Stitch. My brother joins us a third of the way through the day. At first, we're all hanging out and having fun, but then I see Rubik got a text message from that girl again. I immediately asked to see his phone, and he said no. Again, call me an asshat, call me intrusive. At this point, I don't care. But I snatched the phone from him and scrolled through the messages, and they had both been talking smack about me and calling me insane for wanting him to cut her off. You were literally cheating on me with her, dude! So, at this point, Rubik tries charging at me, but Stitch and my brother grab him to hold him back while I'm checking the messages. First, Rubik breaks free from my brother, then Stitch, then finally charges at me and pushes me full force into the ground. That hurt, like, really badly. What does he do? Grab his phone, and then leaves my brother and Stitch to help me. So I'm sitting there crying while Stitch and my brother comfort me, and I guess at some point Rubik realized what he did, and then he pulled a stunt where he tried to climb the fence separating the highway from the foliage in my neighborhood and try to get hit by a car. I didn't run to stop him, but Stitch did. After that, my brother and Stitch went to go play with the neighbor kids, leaving Rubik and I alone. I told Rubik at that point I was done. I couldn't trust him anymore. He broke that trust by not only going against my wishes, but talking smack about me with his mistress, and then pushes me to the ground to get his phone back. Unfortunately, I did end up staying with him because he started crying and promised he'd never do anything like that again. I believed him, as foolish as that sounds now. He wouldn't cheat on me again, but he still continued to be an abusive butthead, threatening self-deletion and being both physically and verbally abusive. Those other events were much smaller than this one, so I won't go into more detail on those. Before getting to the ending, remember Sketch? Yeah, my relationship with Rubik ruined my friendship with Sketch for a while because I became a total dickbag and would defend his actions and completely shaft her, saying she was a liar and what Rubik said was the truth. Later on, we did become friends again, and I learned Rubik was the liar. She actually helped me through our breakup a great deal. Their real reason for breaking up was lack of communication. Sketch was not clingy, she was merely texting every other day or so to make sure he was okay. He took that as clinginess somehow and ended it. I consider clingy like my rotten ex-girlfriend, texting every 10 to 15 minutes if I didn't respond. Constantly wanting to be around me no matter what. Sketch was not clingy, and I horribly regret not taking her side back then after all of what Rubik did to me. We stayed together for a few months longer until contact started to dwindle between us. Eventually, he contacts me, and we continue our relationship for another week. For this final week, he tries to control the way I talk and my cursing because all of a sudden he says he found Jesus. It was confusing, and I didn't like how he was trying to control how I speak. At this point, I thought, you know what, I think I've had enough, and I told him so, and then he goes on to threaten self-deletion again, and I had reached my limit by this point in time, so I texted him back to just do it then, if he keeps threatening it. I know that sounds bad, but as someone who has actually struggled with those thoughts on multiple occasions in my past, he was obviously doing it for attention at this point, and I was sick and tired of it. After that, contact completely faded away for 3 days, and then finally he texted me breaking up with me. At first I was destroyed, but eventually I came to realize, god damn, this guy was horrible. One good thing came out of this besides the lesson, and that was that, in the void this butthead left, I became closer with George Thorogood, the friend I mentioned before. I had been friends with Thorogood in the background, but through this whole mess, but with the absence of Rubik, we became closer. We didn't date, though, but I will admit I did have a tiny crush on him that was short-lived once he got a girlfriend. Rubik and I stayed friends for a few months after our relationship ended, however, contact faded entirely once sophomore year was over. At some point before contact completely ended, he did try to get a friend to turn against me in a similar manner that my rotten ex-girlfriend did. However, unlike her, he failed to achieve that mission, luckily. If I ever saw Rubik again in real life, I wouldn't engage. So much has changed since then, and I would hope that he doesn't even recognize me anymore. If he did approach me, however, I'd make the interaction as quick as possible, as I would not want to speak with him for more than a single minute after all the shit that he did to me. No thanks. Now, of course, I was not all peaches and cream in this relationship either. I acknowledge that, and I have since matured from this, but I honestly pity Rubik, and I hope he has righted himself and gotten better at treating his partners correctly, or rather just improved upon himself in general. Though, last I heard, he was a freeloader, refused to get a job, and only wanted to play Fortnite all day. Ain't that something? What I learned from this relationship is not to take anyone's bullcrap, especially if they're only trying to get attention. All that self deletion talk was attention grabbing and guilt tripping to the max, and the abuse was just unacceptable. That relationship taught me to stand up for myself, and if I feel like a partner is doing something wrong, to talk about it and not just sit there like an idiot and let them walk all over you. TLDR for the lesson, I learned to grow a pair of balls and speak up, and to defend myself. So, that is it for X number 2. I'm sorry that this one was much longer than the first episode, but this relationship lasted 6 months or so, while their relationship in episode 1 only lasted for a month and a half. Plus, Arthur never did anything wrong, so there wasn't really much to talk about. And be prepared for longer episodes, maybe even longer than this one, especially further on in the series, because the last 2 relationships I'll delve into before the finale lasted a while. Well, until next time, thank you for watching, and have a great day.